What's up, guys? Hope you're having a good week. Last week we talked signal flow. This week we're talking compression. And my goal is to get to the core of what compression is and how it can be used to improve your overall mix. So there's three lanes I like to think about when it comes to compression. The first lane is how compression can bring a tighter dynamic to your inputs and overall mix, especially when dealing with live audio and larger rooms with larger dynamics. And potentially even having to live with conservative dB limits on your mix. Compression can be used to get control and consistency out of your mix, which maximizes those dB limits that you have to live within. And the end result of that is a perceived larger and fuller mix than maybe the dB that you're living at, you would think you would get. And so the second lane I'm thinking through is how each compressor has its own coloration it can add and thumbprint it can add to each input in your overall mix, and using those to your advantage to get different tonalities that you might not otherwise be able to get. The third lane I'm thinking through is through subgroup mixing and having multiple inputs going through a subgroup. Compression can help to bring cohesiveness to those inputs and having them flow dynamically together with an end result of a gluing effect and having a mastering sound that helps to get more of a tightness out of your mix. And so those are the additives. Some of the things that I would caution you that could be some negative effects of compression and overcompressing is you can lose some of your gain before feedback. You could raise the noise floor around your input. You could squash the dynamics of your mix. And you could have distracting, noticeable compression that takes away from your mix. So those are things to be thinking about when it comes to compression. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the console. I'm going to talk through some parameters, talk through some different compressors, and show you how I use them on inputs. So we're going to use just our typical channel compression to go through some of these parameters. So let's talk through this. So you got your compressor on off, which brings the compressor into effect. You have your threshold, which sets the level of audio required for the compression to be engaging on the input. You have the ratio that sets the ratio of compression that happens after exceeding the threshold. So for example, a 2-to-1 ratio will take an audio source that exceeds the threshold by 2 dB and compress it down to 1 dB of output level. Attack is how fast the compressor engages on your audio after exceeding the threshold. Release is how fast the compressor releases its audio to the previous uncompressed level. Output gain boosts the output signal of the compressor to make up for gain lost due to compression. And then the knee controls the rate at which your transition from uncompressed audio to your threshold is set. And then also you can see on here you have your gain reduction metering, you have your input and output metering, and then you have an option to key in your audio, which allows you to do some sidechain compression from a different source. So there you have it. This is and if this is the only compressor you have in your console, you can still accomplish a lot with this. So we're going to take a look at some other compressors though and talk through how I use them. This first compressor we're looking at is modeled after an 1176. You can see it has some similar parameters to your normal channel compression, but also has some significant differences as well. So your input replaces your threshold, and the higher the input, the more gain reduction you get, and then you just have to adjust the output on the back end. You have some different ratio options. When you're in the all option with this, it's pretty cool. You can get some limiting with still transparency, and then on the attack and release side, those operate just a little bit differently as well. But overall, I really like this compressor on drums and bass. As far as coloration, it adds a lot more thickness, a lot more punch and aggressive tones to those inputs. And so when I'm thinking drums, I'm trying to get a consistent hit while still allowing the transients to come through, allowing the drums to breathe. And so if I have a consistent drummer, I'll have my release be a little bit longer, but also have my attack be longer. But then if you have a drummer who's not as consistent, I'll speed up my attack to try and take away some of those inconsistencies. And then with bass, same deal. I have my release be a lot longer, and depending on the player and depending on his bass, I'm going for an even sound across the fretboard and in the subs. And so I might have my attack be a little bit longer, or if it's someone who's not as consistent, I'll speed that up to try and even out the sound. And then overall gain reduction, I'm thinking -3 to -5. Anything above -5, and you infringe upon overcompressing. So this second compressor we're looking at is modeled after an LA2A. Right away you can see it doesn't have an attack or release because those are fixed with this kind of compressor. But the thing that I like about this compressor is it's very clear and transparent, and so when you're getting gain reduction, it does it in a way where you don't feel like you notice it happening so much, but you do get an even sound out of it. And so I really like using this on vocals to minimize some of the different proximities to the mic. On acoustic guitars, it can work well for evening out some of the strumming patterns that are coming through. Same thing on keys. When you have a keys player who's playing, at different intensities on the keyboard, this has a nice way of kind of evening those out. And then lastly, I'm thinking electric guitar, and I'm just touching it with this compressor and getting some more evenness out on the fretboard. And so when I'm thinking of gain reduction, I'm trying to stay between -2 to -3. Anything past -3, and you fringe upon over compressing. The last compressor we're looking at is this bus compressor, which I use in my subgroups. It is very good at gluing inputs together, getting them to be very cohesive, but also not squashing them, really letting them breathe. This thing is the perfect compressor for that. I only will go into maybe -1, -2 in gain reduction, set my ratio a little bit lower. It is perfect for that. Now, if you don't have something like this and you're using just a normal compressor, what I would say is have your ratios be low, go down to 2 to 1 as low as you can. Set your attack and release to be a lot longer, allow things to really transparently come through, and then have very minimal threshold and gain reduction. And that's a great way to think about how your subgroup. You really just want it to be the final touch, the mastering on your subgroups and even on your master bus. Well, there you have it. Compression in a nutshell. I hope that was helpful. Would love to hear from you how you're using compression to get a little more consistency, maybe a little more control, and a better overall end product. So next week we're going to talk through staging compression. I'm looking forward to that. So thanks for tuning in.